What's up guys, how is it doing? I'm a new content creator called Him. Today we're gonna be reacting to all 16 final forms in Jujutsu Kaisen explained. And let's get straight into it.
From sorcerers reaching their full potential to insane transformations that'll absolutely blow your mind, these are all 16 final forms in Jujutsu Kaisen. And let's start with Sukuna. At some point in the past, Sukuna's soul was split into 20 indestructible
This is so crazy how it's split to 20. Like 1, 2 through 5 is acceptable, but 20 is crazy.
fingers that were scattered all throughout Japan. Then in episode 1, Yuji ate one of those fingers, which awakened Sukuna inside the boy.
And if my voice is sounding a little weird, this is because it's kind of nighttime for me, and I'm kind of doing this while my mom's sleeping, so she doesn't hear. I'm just a small content creator, so it will help me if you could press that subscribe button and like. And I don't know if this is any copyright stuff. I'm just a small content creator. I'm gonna be for real right now. I'm like 14, bro.
Then on, Yuji lived with Sukuna inside his body, with the curse occasionally taking over. However, it wasn't until the Shinjuku showdown that Sukuna finally managed to awake his ultimate final form once again. In this form, Sukuna basically regained every physical characteristic of his
Because he had powers, bro. This guy was unstoppable, but then after that he became just unbelievable.
original body from 1,000 years ago. With his 4 arms, 4 eyes, and second mouth on his stomach, he was a force to be reckoned with. His control over his nearly limitless amount of cursed energy was even more impressive than Gojo's, and his ability to use reverse curse technique made him
Now that I cannot agree with. Better than Gojo's? Nah, he'd win.
practically unkillable.
See what I
Sukuna's
did there?
main attack in this form was Dismantle, which is pretty much a long-range slash that can cut anything in an instant, even entire buildings. Besides that, Sukuna was able to use his domain expansion multiple times without burning out, which was something that only he and Gojo could pull off. In
Because
this
they're
form,
great.
Sukuna fought against literally everyone at the same time, and no matter what the sorcerers did, they could just not bring this monster down. The only reason he was brought down in the end was because Yuji awakened his own domain expansion and was able to trap Sukuna within it. There's still 15 final forms left to cover, and let's continue with Mahito. Mahito was the curse born from the fear and hate humans hold for each other. Ever since we were first introduced to him, it was clear that Mahito had a ton of growing potential. This was mostly because of his ridiculous curse technique, Idol Transfiguration, which pretty much allows him to change his soul and the souls of others. In his usual form, Mahito looked mostly like a normal human, with stitches going all across his body and face, along with blue hair. In this form, Mahito's strength was comparable to 3 Sukuna fingers, and he managed to fight on par with Yuji and Nanami before eventually overpowering them. By the time of the Shibuya incident took place, Mahito evolved greatly and was much stronger than before. At this point, he was able to create a clone of himself to help him in battle and even learned how to use Black Flash. In this form, he's also able to merge many weaker souls together, creating a completely new being which he could control during battle. However, not even this is where Mahito's growth stopped, as near the end of this arc, he finally awakened his final form. Discovering a hidden power deep inside himself, Mahito was able to transform into a grotesque monster. He calls this form Instant Spirit Body of Distorted Killing. While in this form, Mahito was much bulkier, and it's said that he was around 200% stronger than usual.
Work today is broken.
Oh my god.
Every
these
day,
ads,
people
bro.
juggle so many different
And I don't know how
tools.
to edit, so I
Mahito's
can't
endurance
cut them
was absolutely crazy in this form, as he was able to tank Yuji's strongest punches like they were nothing, before eventually being overpowered. Next up is Rika. Once an average girl, Rika was just a
Rika's
child
the
when she
second
suddenly died
strongest
in a
curse
car
after Sukuna. Like for real.
accident. After this tragic incident, her best friend Yuta unknowingly used his cursed energy to transform her into a spirit bound to him for life. Turned into a special grade vengeful spirit, Rika transformed into a monstrous figure. Her lower body was basically just a shadow, while her upper body was muscular, with a single big eye on her head. With enough training, Rika and Yuta became a strong duo, and she was one of the main reasons Yuta was considered one of the strongest sorcerers in the story.
Yeah, he got carried. He was not strong without Rika. He got
Rika
carried.
was able to use her body to store cursed items for Yuta and even help him steal other people's techniques by eating parts of their bodies. Even on her own, Rika's strength was insane, and she even earned the nickname Queen of Curses. But can you believe that this still wasn't Rika's final form? You see, recently in the Jujutsu Kaisen sequel manga, Modolo, Rika made a comeback and performed a new technique where she took over Tsurugi's body, who is Yuta's grandson. Basically, once Tsurugi accepted Rika's offer to help, she possessed his body and the two merged together, wearing Rika as a sort of mask. Tsurugi's physical body was buffed immensely. Not only that, Rika can now summon cursed tools straight from her shadow, like a katana that can conjure cursed spirits and cut through skyscrapers. And although
Wait, I thought currencies were gone after Sukuna was sealed. Wait, have I been lied to my whole life?
Rika's final form is absolutely crazy, let's talk about a character whose final form was a bit more flashier, Kashimo. Known as the God of Lightning, Kashimo was a sorcerer from 400 years ago who was
Now this is just a copy from Zenitsu. I wish I could throw a Zenitsu edit in here.
reincarnated to participate in the culling games. In his reincarnated form, Kashimo wears a white-colored robe, has bandages on his forearms, as well as lightning marks around his eyes. Kashimo's goal was pretty much to look for and fight strong opponents. In fact, the only reason he even agreed to getting reincarnated was to potentially battle Sukuna, as he wanted to prove he was the strongest sorcerer alive. During battles,
And he failed.
Kashimo usually fights by creating thunderbolts
Gojo's way better, and he just copied Gojo's, saying, nah, I'd win.
that are guaranteed to hit his opponents.
I'm not
This,
gonna
paired with his
back into
immense
the
speed,
I'm gonna
fighting
beat
prowess, and strength, makes Kashimo an elite level fighter who was even powerful enough to almost kill Hakari. Oh, and his lightning abilities aren't even part of his curse technique. It's just something he learned to do by manipulating cursed energy. So what's his curse technique, you ask? Well, that's where his final form comes in. You see, Kashimo's curse technique is called Mythic Beast Amber, and it's a technique that can only be activated once. This is because the technique essentially destroys Kashimo's entire body in order to create electricity, basically making him a living lightning bolt. It was said in this form, Kashimo far surpasses the realm of humans and becomes something else entirely. Through the entire culling games, Kashimo restrained himself from using this technique as he wanted to save it for Sukuna when the two eventually met. However, once that finally happened, despite all of his buffs, Kashimo was still nowhere close to Sukuna's strength and was quickly defeated. 12 more left, and let's continue with Nobara. When we were introduced to Nobara in the show, she was just a regular sorcerer. She wore a Jujutsu sorcerer uniform and kept her hammer and nails with her at all times. Nobara's innate technique is called Resonance, and it allows her to use her straw dolls to inflict harm on her opponents. Despite only being a grade 3 sorcerer, Nobara showed early on that she was able to fight on par with sorcerers well above her grade when needed. She showed this during her fight against Eso and Kechizu, where she went absolutely wild and helped Yuji defeat the curses. However, despite her strength, she was almost killed by Mahito during Shibuya, as she stood no chance against him. She was only saved thanks to Arata, who used his curse technique to heal her. Later on, Nobara finally reappeared during the Shinjuku showdown to help Yuji deal with Sukuna in the final moment of their fight. Here, Nobara used her resonance technique to bind Sukuna's last finger, which opened up an attack window long enough for Yuji to land the final blow. It's important to mention that in this form, Nobara appeared much stronger than the last time we saw her. She also had an eye patch over one of her eyes, which made her look much cooler too. And although this is technically Nobara's final form, we also saw her again in the JJK sequel manga, Modulo. Multiple decades into the future, Nobara now mostly spends her days enjoying her hard-earned retirement. She's an ordinary old lady who fondly remembers her days as a sorcerer and has a somewhat healthy relationship with Yuji, despite not seeing him for several years. Now let's cover Gojo. Gojo was the first child born in over 400 years to possess both the Six Eyes and the Limitless technique, which are basically the two most overpowered techniques in all of Jujutsu Kaisen. Ever since he was a kid, Gojo had a bounty on his head due to his ridiculous power, as both sorcerers and curses feared him and wanted to get rid of him as soon as possible. However, all of them were powerless against him. With time, Gojo slowly mastered his abilities, and when the time came, he enrolled in Tokyo High. At this point, he was already considered one of the strongest sorcerers ever, but this was just the beginning. Soon enough, Gojo got a reality check when he lost a duel against Toji Fushiguro. However, as he was bleeding out on the ground, Gojo finally figured out how to use reverse curse technique, something that had troubled him his entire life. Now completely healed, Gojo absolutely destroyed Toji in their rematch, calling himself the Honored One and giving us one of the most iconic panels in the story. From this point on, Gojo kept improving. At some point, he also learned how to manifest a domain, which made him literally unstoppable. Gojo's final form came during his final fight against Sukuna. Prior to this fight, Gojo's strength was enhanced by Utahime, which allowed him to perform his purple technique at 200% of its normal power. The damage this technique caused was absolutely crazy, as it was by far the strongest attack we've seen Gojo use. Later on during the fight, Gojo's feats just kept getting more insane as he was able to come up with strategies mid-battle, open his domain multiple times in a row, and even survive direct malevolent shrine attacks. All in all, Gojo proved why he was the strongest sorcerer of his era, and watching him go all out was amazing. While Gojo used his final form to protect others, the same can't be said for this next one, Naoya. As the youngest son of Naobito's Zenin, Naoya was next in line to rule the family thanks to his abilities and lineage, but fate had other plans for him. In his usual form, Naoya looked like an average human. He wore a traditional kimono paired with simple sandals. Naoya also inherited his father's curse technique, projection sorcery, which allowed him to split each second into 24 frames and move incredibly fast. His overall strength and abilities were on very high levels, as he was pretty much the only one in the entire Zenin clan capable of holding his own against Maki. Well, at least for a while. You see, after his death, Naoya came back as a vengeful cursed spirit since he was killed by his mother, who wasn't a sorcerer. In this form, Naoya's body resembled a caterpillar and he was able to use projection sorcery as well as fly, which made his technique even more dangerous. Once evolved, Naoya's final form was a chrysalis with a skull instead of a face, and tendrils making up his body's organs and limbs. Yeah, he turned into a literal monster. In this form, he was able to suck in air through the holes in his body.
If you're sending prompts all day, ChatGPT, Claude, Replit, honestly wherever you're thinking out loud or building with AI, here are 3 tips that will get you dramatically better results. First, go into your Claude settings,
which allowed him to increase his top speed and reach Mach 3. This speed boost was substantial enough to greatly harm Maki and Noritoshi, despite the two working together. To make matters worse, Naoya was even able to use domain expansion in this form, which allowed him to trap his opponents in a womb-like space that basically applies the 24 frames rule to his enemies on a cellular level. To put it simply, if you don't follow the 24 FPS rule inside the domain, you're dead. Naoya called it Time Cell Moon Palace. He put up quite a fight in this form and was clearly stronger than any of his opponents. The only reason he lost in the end was because he couldn't detect Maki's sneak attack, as he was busy dealing with Noritoshi and the rest of the newcomers. And similar to Naoya, Maki had somewhat of a rebirth herself. As a child, Maki and her sister Mai were basically stains on their family's legacy. They were both very weak and shunned for their lack of cursed energy and inability to become strong sorcerers. Things got so bad that Maki eventually left the clan altogether and joined Jujutsu High on her own merit. In her usual form, Maki resembled an average teenage girl in a basic uniform, and she usually carried a cursed tool by her side. Before the culling games started, Maki went back to the Zenin clan warehouse in order to retrieve some cursed objects. However, it's here that her life changed forever. Instead of retrieving the weapons, Maki and Mai were captured by their father and basically thrown in a pit to die. It's here that Mai sacrificed herself in order to help Maki become stronger. With her sacrifice, Mai took with her the little cursed energy Maki had. Now, completely without cursed energy, Maki became infinitely more powerful, comparable even to Toji Fushiguro. In this form, Maki basically turned into an unstoppable beast that eventually slaughtered the entire Zenin clan. After her transformation, Maki's body was significantly more muscular than before, and she even ditched her glasses, which gave her a much more badass look. At this point, she becomes one of the strongest characters in the entire story. The only character she couldn't defeat was Sukuna, but even then, Maki put up a decent fight against the most powerful sorcerer in history. The last time we saw Maki was in Mojulo. After decades of hunting curses, Maki retired as an old woman and lived a comfortable life with her grandchildren in Yuta, who she eventually married. And next up is Megumi. Megumi is the son of Toji Fushiguro, which makes him one of the characters with the highest potential in the entire series. Throughout his life, Megumi developed excellent hand-to-hand combat skills, and he also inherited the 10 Shadows technique that the Zenin clan was famous for. Megumi's first major power-up happened near the end of Season 1, when he fought a special grade curse all by himself. During this fight, Megumi finally learned how to manifest his domain expansion, which made him much more dangerous than before. He called it Chimera's Shadow Garden, and it essentially allows him to turn the ground around him into a shadowy liquid, from which he can summon as many Shikigami as he wants, completely overwhelming his opponents. Later on, during the culling games, Megumi was transformed into his final form when Sukuna completely took over his body. While possessed, this version of Megumi was far more powerful than even Yuji was in his possessed state. Growing an extra set of arms and eyes, Megumi's body was put under extreme pressure, but it survived thanks to Sukuna's impressive reversed curse technique. Eventually, after Sukuna was defeated, Megumi regained control of his body and returned to his normal self. And now let's cover Kinjaku. Kinjaku was a legendary Jujutsu sorcerer who was alive for over 1,000 years. He achieved this through his body hopping curse technique, which allowed him to implant his brain into other bodies. Although we don't know how Kenjaku originally looked, we do know that around 400 years ago he took over the body of Noritoshi Kamo, a member of the Kamo clan. One important thing to mention about Kenjaku is that in addition to taking over bodies, he also inherits air-cursed techniques, which made him even more terrifying. Throughout his life, Kenjaku swapped many bodies, but eventually ended up in Geto's, which essentially was his final form. In this form, Kenjaku could use Geto's cursed spirit manipulation to capture and store cursed spirits, along with Geto's cursed energy. There's only 6 more characters left to cover, and I can't wait to show you guys Yuji's final form in the end. But before that, let's continue with Todo. When it comes to sheer physical strength and durability, few compared to the strongest Kyoto High student, Aoi Todo. Famous for his ability to land 3 consecutive black flashes, Todo was feared by other students. In his usual form, Todo often wore a tank top and kept his long hair tied in a ponytail. Most of Todo's insane strength came from his ridiculous curse technique called Boogie Woogie. This technique allowed Todo to swap the positions of any 2 things that possess cursed energy by clapping his hands. He first showcased this technique against Hanami when he used it to swap places with Yuji multiple times, completely confusing the curse. However, after losing one of his hands during the Shibuya arc, everyone thought Todo's career as a sorcerer was over since, well, he couldn't clap with one hand. But this was far from the truth, because losing his hand is exactly what allowed Todo to reach the true potential of his technique and unlock his true form. You see, during the Shinjuku Showdown, Todo revealed that he replaced his missing hand with an instrument called the Vibra Slap. Although it looks silly, this thing allows Todo to clap over 50 times per second. That also means Todo can swap positions of things 50 times per second as well, which makes fighting him almost impossible as his opponents can't even tell what's happening. This new and improved Todo was one of the main reasons Yuji was able to deal so much damage to Sukuna early on during their fight. But now let's go over to Kokichi. When Kokichi was born, he was gifted with a massive amount of cursed energy. However, in exchange for that power, he completely lost feeling in his lower body and lacked a right arm. On top of that, every pore of his skin reacted negatively to the air around him, which forced him to spend his entire life covered in bandages, trapped inside a remote cave. In this state, all Kokichi could do was use his innate technique, puppet manipulation, to live his life through the eyes of his puppets. Eventually, Kokichi made a deal with Mahito. In exchange for information, Mahito would heal his body and turn him into a normal human. This is exactly what happened, but immediately afterwards, Mahito betrayed him and the two engaged in battle. Now completely healed and feeling better than ever, Kokichi was a completely different man. He immediately began using his strongest weapon called Ultimate Mechamaru to deal massive damage to Mahito. In his final form, Kokichi controlled a giant robot and used it to channel 17 years of stored cursed energy to perform truly devastating attacks. However, despite all this raw power, Kokichi couldn't handle Mahito alone and was eventually killed. And while giant robots are cool, what about becoming immortal? At one point, Tengen was just an ordinary woman. She was depicted with long hair and a traditional kimono. Due to her innate curse technique called immortality, she basically couldn't die. Well, it's a bit more complicated than that. You see, in order for Tengen to maintain her sanity and maintain her human form, she had to absorb a star plasma vessel every several hundred years. This process went well up until the point when Toji Fushiguro stopped the ritual by killing Riko. Without a star plasma vessel, Tengen was forced to evolve and transformed into something else entirely. Their new form was a short humanoid body with a cylindrical head, and they had 4 eyes instead of 2. By the time the main story of JJK started, Tengen was one of the most important figures in the Jujutsu world, and they were the sole person responsible for the barriers that kept Jujutsu High safe from cursed spirits. During the Culling Games, Kenjaku eventually found Tengen and absorbed them in order to fuel the great merger between cursed spirits and humans.
This is your brain when you're struggling to focus. And this is your brain when you're in the zone, but getting in the zone.
Tengen's torn up body was later discovered scattered around Sukuna's remains. And although Tengen didn't get their happy ending, this next character somehow managed to get one despite losing their body too. We were first introduced to Yuta during the Jujutsu Kaisen 0 movie. Here we learned that Yuta was cursed by Rika, an insanely powerful curse spirit whose only goal was to protect Yuta from any harm. Despite not knowing anything about Jujutsu at the beginning, Yuta was already one of the strongest characters in the entire show. Fought on par with Sukuna in this form and was one of the main reasons the sorcerers won in the end. However, it's important to mention that Yuta could only stay in Gojo's body for a year, which was thought to be impossible. With these new abilities, this possessed Sumiki became one of the strongest Culling Game players. She even managed to stand her ground against Sukuna for a while, but ultimately lost that battle. But now let's cover Yuji. Created to be the perfect vessel for Sukuna, Yuji was Kenjaku's science experiment, along with several others known as the Cursed Womb Death Paintings. Although he believed he was a normal boy for most of his life, that quickly changed when he met Megumi and learned about curses. It was during this time that Yuji ate one of Sukuna's fingers, which made him possessed by the strongest sorcerer in history. After regaining control over himself and enrolling in Jujutsu High, Yuji's training under Gojo made him far stronger, and he learned how to control cursed energy. He became really strong, really fast, and was soon able to deal with power calculated version of Yuji, who didn't just go to an absolute monster to bring the king of curses down. He also awakened his domain expansion in this form, although in Jujutsu Kaisen Modulo, Shinjuku. In Modulo, Yuji's appearance is still kept secret, and he usually wears a jacket with a hood covering most of his face. Although there's still a lot we don't know about this version of Yuji, what we do know is that he's completely mastered the techniques of blood manipulation, as we saw him going absolutely wild with it in one of the recent chapters. Click on this video next, where I explain all 60 curse
Okay, so this was a great video. Honestly, solid video. Give it a 29. Give it a 10. Give it a 7 out of 10. Very good video. I like the part about Gojo, Itadori, and how they explain and define detail. But the Nobara part got me off guard about how she transformed. Is it just a pie recap? So that's all for today. So see you in the next video if I get to make one. Oh shit, my mom's coming. I better stop recording. Okay, so please comment, like, or subscribe.